spider can. Spins a web any size. Catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
No, is that not working for you? Well, let's try doing it this way. Yes, folks, let's fire up because today is the debut of the Spider-Way No Way Home film, the third film in the Spider-Man trilogy, but it's going to be a whole lot more from Spider-Man going forwards in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This film, featuring Zendaya and Tom Holland, is bringing back some of the other Spider-Man villains, and the big one that I'm really expecting to see here, disappointed what I've seen so far, there is no strong teaser that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire will enter the Spider-Verse. Now, they'll make cameo appearances, I think, at best in this film, but the real question about this film is it just simply going to be a rehash of the animated movie that was actually quite good, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? Of course it won't be. We've got Doctor Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, sharing top billing with Tom Holland in this film, where, as we've seen in the trailers so far, Spider-Man has been outed in the end of the last movie after his battle with Mysterio by J. Jonah Jameson, who I think actually is played by the same actor who has played J. Jonah Jameson in some of the previous Sony-controlled Spider-Man iterations. But this has been a long time coming, and the big spoiler here, this is my own opinion, not what I know from the studios, but what I know from the history in the comic books, Spider-Man becomes the leader of the Avengers. Seems improbable when you first think about it, but look at the seeds, the Easter eggs they've been planting. For instance, in the second film, Spider-Man Far From Home, where Spider-Man, after the emotional departure of Tony Stark from the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Iron Man, after his very courageous act in The Snap, Tony's gizmos and gimmicks, they're all in the hands of Spider-Man thanks to the special glasses that he wears. Now, whilst I think from memory he hands them back over at the end of the film, I think in effect Iron Man has anointed Spider-Man to take over from him. And that's why I think they've signed Tom Holland for another 3 Marvel Cinematic Universe films. Usually when you finish a trilogy, there's a question mark about how much farther you go, except for the ensemble movies like we saw with Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame. But clearly Tom Holland is not just going to be around for this film, the third in the trilogy, but 3 more. And I dare say they're going to be somewhat like the Captain America appearances as a major feature character in the future of the Avengers. Someone else, incidentally, who has certainly teased joining up with Spider-Man, at least on screen, maybe not as buddies, is Venom. If you've seen the end credits scene, I don't want to spoil the movie, it only recently came out for you. Venom, a traditional enemy of Spider-Man, and let's just say the makers of Venom have very directly teased the possibility of a head-to-head clash, Venom v Spider-Man, in future. But anyway, Spider-Man No Way Home, the third movie in the series, out today. Spider-Man trying to fix up the fact he was exposed as his identity being Peter Parker, and things going sideways and probably opening up the multiverse in another direction. We've already seen in the television series Loki the timelines being opened up in various ways. And of course in Endgame, the multiverse being a way through Ant-Man's quantum technology of time travel. It's all exploding in all sorts of directions. And now Doctor Strange seems to have cracked open another way for everything to blur together. This brings me to Boxing Day, and there's not going to be any movie bigger than the next one I'm going to profile. We've got Sing 2 coming out, West Side Story, the movie adaptation of that musical, Swan Song and The Duke, but the big one that everyone's going to be flocking to, I think, is The Matrix Resurrections, the 4th movie in the Matrix series. And from the trailer that we've seen, we have Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss back again, but somehow first of all, they're still alive. That's a major spoiler from the trailer, but also they seem to have forgotten their life battling against the machines and the Matrix, and they presumably are living again in the Matrix, her minds having been completely wiped. And I guess they've got to remember everything they were capable of again. That seems to be the premise of the film. That's Matrix Resurrections, the 4th movie in the series. Goodness knows how many more matrices it's going to spin off after this, but that's the big one on Boxing Day. Coming out on New Year's Day is Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is, I don't know what you call it. There was an attempt to reboot Ghostbusters with an all-female cast featuring Chris Hemsworth as the man Candy in that movie, but that didn't go down terribly well. This is an attempt to go in a different direction and make a connection between the old Ghostbusters cast involving Dan Aykroyd and friends, ably assisted by the comedic work of Paul Rudd and a whole bunch of kids participating in some sort of child analogues in some senses for the original Ghostbusters. It does feel to me like this film is more or less about revisiting the special effects that couldn't do in the old Ghostbusters films and doing some crazy stuff in these films thanks to what they can do with CGI these days. It'll be a whole lot of fun when you probably run out of ideas of what to do after a week of Christmas holidays and finishing off the Christmas ham. That's Ghostbusters Afterlife on the New Year's Day holiday. Casting our eyes just into January, the next movie in the Kingsman series isn't really a trilogy because The King's Man, coming out on the 6th of January, is more so a trip back in time to the origins of the Kingsman universe, if you like. There are talks about further movies happening in this series. I was not impressed with the Golden Circle, the second movie in the Kingsman series, which was quite gruesome and inappropriate in places, let's just put it that way. But that's on the 6th of January. One that, for the comic book fans and sci-fi fans, worth keeping an eye out for is the film Morbius. Now, this is a crossover for Jared Leto. This is a change for him. He played the Joker in the DC universe previously, but here he is playing a character who is a bit like Deadpool, ambiguously whether he's a villain or a hero, but not going to be one for the young kiddies to see, a bit like Deadpool, and that's why I mentioned Deadpool, as I think it's part of the breaking open of Marvel heading into the more, I guess you could say, the restricted category or the MA15 plus side of the cinematic universe. This one in its trailer says it's in association with Marvel. So I think it's sitting just outside the canonical Marvel universe at the moment of, say, Venom and Deadpool, who, as it stands, as far as I understand it right now, outside the universe, but may well come into it. So that is Morbius, coming out on the 22nd of January. And speaking of darker movies, that brings me to this.
The hell are you supposed to be? I'm vengeance.
Oh, that sounded a little bit nasty and it didn't quite come off right. Let's go back to Michael Keaton and see who did it better.
Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man! Don't kill me! Don't kill me, man! I'm not going to kill you. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me. What are you? I'm Batman.
Well, hot diggity, that was 1989. Michael Keaton uttered those famous words that really exploded Batman onto the big screen. Of course, Christian Bale took Batman to another level. Where will Robert Pattinson take Batman in March of 2022 with a movie very creatively titled The Batman? Yes, it's The Batman calling himself Vengeance, with very different looking Colin Farrell playing the Penguin in this movie. He's done such a good job of it apparently and put on a lot of weight, a bit like Christian Bale himself did for the movie Vice, where he played Dick Cheney, Vice President of the United States of America. But we've got Colin Farrell. He's put on a lot of weight to play the Penguin, almost unrecognisable, but he's done such a good job that he's earned himself a spin-off series apparently on HBO Max, which I thought that's what Gotham was all about, origin stories for the Batman villains and obviously Bruce Wayne himself. But back to The Batman, the movie coming out in March of 2022. It's going in the direction I thought for some years where DC needed to go. It's not a direction everyone's going to agree with, but a very adults-only direction. That little punch-up there between Robert Pattinson and one of the bad guys certainly sounded like some breaking of limbs, and it does seem that The Batman will be quite dark and brooding, which is very much up Batman's alley, but maybe not be everyone's cup of tea in the superhero genre. But that's where The Batman is heading, and it may even deal with corruption and possibly corruption even within the Waynes' own family. But yes, everyone's favourite billionaire vigilante will be back on our screens, but it won't be Ben Affleck. It will be Twilight's Robert Pattinson. The jury will be well and truly out on how that goes, but I think probably going to be better received than Ben Affleck as Batman, who was, if I recall correctly, by some margin, the tallest ever Batman, certainly a lot taller than Adam West, who originally played Batman in the television and very camp series. But that rounds out our look forward over the coming months into what's coming up in the movies here on RikksFlix. After a short break, we're going to talk a bit about what's been out on streaming, some of the good stuff you might have missed, a bit of a review of what is on our streaming services, and tomorrow night we will look even further ahead to coming releases in the cinemas and on streaming services in our back-to-back RikksFlix special.